Dave, before I let you go, I have to ask you some other stuff about XTC. I wanted
Go
to
ahead.
possibly let's do this as sort of a lightning round, and I'll give
Yes,
you
okay.
sort of pepper you and see where we go with that. And then, of course, I also really want to hear about what you've been up to as of late, as I know all the fans do. So let's start off with our XTC lightning round. Top three XTC songs.
Top three favorites or top three productions or what? Because, I have.
Okay, great. That's great. I'm glad you asked me that because I wanted to ask about productions, but let's just say top three compositions.
Chalk Hills and Children. Again, inspired, I think, probably by as much by Brian Wilson as anybody else. Just a perfect, it's just such a gorgeous, Andy sent me the demo of this. And I thought, how did Andy, he's a guitar player, how did he find these chords? Just, an artist doing what an artist does. He sent me a rough demo with a very, very simple keyboard. And I took that away and figured out, I wrote it out in notation so that I'd remember it, all these subtle changes. And also it was important that we had the right synth sounds in order to make this magical, the movements of the chords have the desired emotional effect, which thankfully Paul Fox, who was a keyboard player and produced the record, he had access to so many synths and everything. It wasn't stressful at all. We found them in no time. And the recording process was straightforward. It didn't take long at all. And I remember thinking, this song really does put us on another level, because this is from the guy who wrote Science Friction just a few years earlier.
Yeah.
So that's one, definitely. That's a high spot. And there's another one on another track on Oranges and Lemons that I think is seldom mentioned, Across This Antibes, which was a really, really amazing groove. And it's like a hard-hitting, frantic piece of frenetic nonsense. But again, I never get tired of listening to that. I think we did a great job with that.
Cool.
And again, Paul Fox had he's not been celebrated as often as some of the other producers, but give him his due. He worked really hard on that record.
Well, it's
And
funny that
great
you
result.
mentioned him. The last podcast I recorded, which will come out
Mm-hmm.
sometime soon, is with composer, guitarist, singer, songwriter Ryan Olcott from an American band called 12 Rods. And they were signed to V2 initially, and then Todd produced them, and they were called by many people the American XTC. And when I
Oh,
asked him which XTC stuff he had really been influenced by, he said the Paul Fox stuff first.
yeah.
That's what he said.
And well, that's great. Paul only did the one album with
Yeah.
us, but it's quite an album. He did a great job, and I'm so sorry to, he's not at all well at the moment, and it's really tragic what's happened. And I wish him and Franny well. Yeah, it's a real shame, but he has that legacy, and I'm pleased that we did it. I'm pleased we got the record done,
It's a
because it
great
is,
sounding record.
yeah, it is. And
So,
there's a whole bunch of great songs on it. Um, you asked for three productions. Yes, I think.
you don't
Well,
have to hold
again,
me
you
to it.
see, the Dukes. I love them all from the Ministry. Again, that wouldn't have happened without John Leckie. He knew what we were doing. In fact, he probably knew better than we did how to make that record. And like you say, Andy wrote that in less than 24 hours. And we were just lucky to have had the right piano sound, all the right tape machines, everything in that little studio was there. We made use of. We wouldn't have known what to do with it. John Leckie did.
What are the
But
keyboard
without
components on that album?
I'm sorry, say again?
On the Dukes, what are the keyboards overall?
Well, it was a Steinway grand piano, and we cheated slightly by using a Roland synthesizer for all the keyboards, a Roland JX3P, which is just a little thing with a programmer, PG200 programmer, which a lot of guitar players now are looking for because it's the same programmer they use for the G2 guitar synth, or did back in the 80s. I don't know if they still make it. Anyway, we cheated there. It does a great Farfisa organ. That's really what it was there for. And the same with the little Beach Boys harmonium. That was a Roland as well. I think we used an EMU processor as well on Sonic Sunspot. We did use some EMU stuff.
No Mellotron?
The Mellotron, yes, of course. How could I forget the Mellotron? That was the first use of no, it wasn't. No, we used the Mellotron. What am I talking about? We used it on Mama and on the Big Express prior to that.
Seagulls.
But it was Seagulls, yes, absolutely. We also had, it was also the first time we used the flutes and cellos. These are the famous tapes that I'd gone to the factory to collect prior to the recording of the album starting, the session starting properly. While I was away, Andy had written The Mole. So, with me out of the way, he could get on and write this song. So it was fine. I came back with this new rack of tapes, put them straight in the Mellotron, and there was the cello and the flute as well, of course. So I'm going to say The Mole from the Ministry because I still think it's a great. But then there's other stuff on 25 o'clock. What in the world? I love that. It's just a mess, but what a glorious mess! I'm sorry, but I'll go back there anytime.
Yeah, I love that the first thing that you talked about with Andy before XTC was doing of a psychedelic project.
Yeah.
And then you come on, and then it's sort of laced through all the albums, and then there's this blur between XTC and the Dukes in terms of swapping material.
Yeah. Well, Skylarking, really, Andy has said that Skylarking is really the Dukes of Stratosphere's second album. And I think he's got something there because we did, 25 o'clock, then it was Skylarking, then it was Sonic Sunspot. It's all in that kind of hippie, trippy mindset.
But it carries over to Oranges and Lemons. It carries over to just Nonsuch.
Yeah, it does. Yes, certainly does.
In the best possible way. I mean, for those of us that like that kind of songwriting, certainly it's a continuance of the Beatles and the Beach Boys and Small Faces in so many different areas.
Yeah.
And you talk about what makes it successful. For a lot of us, we listen to it and we sense the love.
Well, that's good. Because it was all done with love, it was no one ever joined XTC to make money, that's for sure. But no, it was because it was the biggest part of all of our lives. I've probably mentioned this before, but for 15 years or so, that was all we thought about. Everything else was peripheral. It was always, what are we going to do next? What's the next record going to sound like? Who are we going to work with? And it's now that we can sort of, we've got some distance from it and can get some perspective. And you realize how much work we actually achieved. And it wasn't, when the band kind of disintegrated, it wasn't really through lack of inspiration as it is most bands, or a lack of interest in doing the music. It was more, business and personal stuff, which is a shame.
Well, I understand that. I will say that that's a run of albums with song after song after song after song, and no really appearance of it kind of winding down. Um, so that in itself is a legacy of consistency, of excellence, and of exploration. Because then there's all these other little side things that, we've talked about, you and I, some of the instrumental things and experimental sort of things. Let me ask you this, Dave. What was the most challenging keyboard part you had to play for XTC?
Most challenging was Rook. The reason it was challenging was that Andy insisted we cut it to a click. Now, I was of the opinion that this was a more organic piece and that it would be better served by something a bit more, with a little bit more give and take rhythmically. But he said, no, you may have to patch some of these string parts with samples, and we might have to run them from a code. So for that reason, we've got to do it to a click. Well, I have to tell you that it took hours. Even I practiced at home, got it all worked out. I could play it and I could feel it. But I don't think Andy had very much faith in my sense of timing. That's the other thing as well. I personally would have we would have got the job done a lot quicker had I not been tied to that wretched click. Because you seem to remember it's these fours, boom, boom, very simple. And then it goes into triple time, cross hands.
Mm-hmm.
So getting from these ponderous quarter note chords onto this 9/8 thing. Yeah. It's a jump.
You didn't do sections, you played it straight through?
Oh no, we did a lot of drop-ins. I could have played it all the way through, but I don't think Andy would have been happy with it.
That's fine. I do think it's one of the all-time great Andy songs. It
is. It's a really great piece of composition. And I'm glad Gus Dudgeon didn't throw his toys out of the pram and bin it.
Who arranged the strings?
Andy, that's mostly his demo, how he demoed the strings on, he had little strings samples. And I just wrote them out, players. Yeah, I didn't interfere with the arrangement too much.
What's your favorite arrangement of XTC?
Well, I'd have to say it's going to be, you mean the string arrangement?
Anything that you arranged for the band?
Yeah, I would, yeah. I kind of like Smartest Monkeys. I think that's really interesting. There's lots of holes in it, which is rare for XTC. It's not a kitchen sink job. There's a lot of space. It's probably not Colin's greatest song, but it works. I like it. Earns its place on that record. I actually got to play a synth solo in the middle there because we were stuck for what we're going to do here. Well, I've got this patch here, and we can throw it through some fuzz. What about this wah-wah pedal? Now, what's this do? It was just like that. And in about 20 minutes, we had this thing down. It wasn't planned. It was just for want of something to do. So I have a fond memory of knocking that together. And I also love the outro with Dave Mattox and Colin's bass. There's something, they left a lot. It's just beautiful, typical Mattox, leaving the holes in the right place. And then it's just a joyous fade out. I really look forward to that coda every time I put the record on.
It is great. And of course, we always talked about the one note drum fill.
That's right. He is the king of that. he's a master of less is more, is Dave.
Yeah. Speaking of ride outs, I've been meaning to ask you, in the live show, when you guys would open up with Beat Town, was that ride out set up in numbers of repeats, or was it an open to be cued ending? If you recall.
No, Ben knows. Yes. I honestly can't remember. I think we just looked at each other, and it was. I'm going to jump in the air, and that's when we stop. It was one of those. We had quite a few of those. Yeah, I don't remember there being a set number. It was just beat town, beat town. We'd just get, we'd all be sweating cobs, and it would be just beat town.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they were reckless days, the live shows. I've heard some tapes recently, and but must have been a lot of fun for the audience.
I love the ride out on B Town, and I always wondered, was like on the album, because it's quite long on the album. You know, there's like events that take place over the course of the ride out, and I just always wondered, like, because I would use event cues in my stuff all the time, so I'm thinking like, well, after that happens and that happens, well, then this is going to happen, and when you're looking for that, then that means we're going out.
Well, that would be the professional and logical way of looking at it, but we didn't always think in those terms. It was a lot of seat of the pants stuff going on the stage with us.
Like what else?
Yeah. And
what other tunes were kind of seat of the pants for XTC?
Well, Battery Brides, shall we say? Which
I know you complained about that intro. Yeah.
Oh man, yes, I think I've bashed on about that before. You never knew quite how long. It depended what Andy had for what Andy had eaten for dinner, how long his solo was going to go on. You never quite knew, so you had to pay attention and just see when he was going back into the song. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. You know, that was always a bit. I remember we also in the early days we did a version of "I'm Bugged" that also had a very long, convoluted instrumental section in the middle of it, and that could often teeter on the edge of falling apart horribly. But we always got back together at some point. A Scissor Man was another one that had a long outro as well. Oh man, that was frantic. Scissor Man used to go at such a pace.
It was faster live.
Oh man, it was much faster. And I don't know, because I struggle to play that even at normal speed today. That was one of the songs that Daniel Steinhardt asked us, you know, when we put Tin Spirits together, we've got to do some XTC covers, mate. First thing I want to do is Scissor Man. So I tried. Sorry, Dan, I can't play it. I cannot play this riff anymore. I used to play it in my sleep at 3 times its normal speed.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's old age. That's what happens.
What's your least favorite XTC song?
Well, I don't know. I don't think there was nothing that I had a serious issue with. Nothing at all. I don't recall there being, you know, a bête noire or anything. All the stuff we played live, they were all, you know, we liked all of those songs. There was nothing that was played under sufferance. I can't honestly answer that question, Greg, because I don't really have a least favorite.
It's a great
answer. There's not really, there's nothing that I detest or really regret having taken part in.
It's nice to be able to say that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. But then, why else would you make music if it wasn't for the love of the song?
Well, sometimes there's a song that gets on your nerves or whatever, but not in this case. That's great.
We all fell in line with. I think it was. I know Andy would always had an issue with Sergeant Rock. He never really liked playing that very much. We did play it live when the single was out.
Not one of my favorites.
No, it's a bit, yeah, probably wouldn't be at the top of my list of things, but it's not a bad song.
No. What is your favorite acoustic XTC?
Yeah, the obvious question would be, answer, I should say. The obvious answer would probably be Love on a Farm Boy's Wages, because again, such a great song and fun to play on acoustic guitar. Difficult to play on electric guitar, in fact.
Hmm.
And the middle eight section is typical Partridge. It's like, who else would write a bridge like that using those shapes? I showed that to Daniel because we did play it a couple of times on with Tin Spirits live. He couldn't believe, he said, that'll never work. I said, well, listen, dang. He was stunned. He thought, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
It was just like you couldn't imagine any other guitar player coming up with a phrase like that.
Mm.
It's true. It never really occurred to me. But then it's the same with the opening chords to Respectable Street. How many guitar players could figure those out? They get the B major at the start. What's the next chord then? Come on, you're so clever. What is it? It's a Partridge chord involving a lot of unnecessary open strings.
It's chunky.
It's very chunky.
I
But
put
he
in.
just had, it was like, it's sort of lateral thinking. It was always be, the line of least resistance with Andy. If it was easy to play for him, that's how it was going to go.
Oh wow.
And, but then again, you see, on the other hand, he'll obsess for hours over how a hi-hat is tuned or where it's going to be in the mix and stuff like that. It doesn't make any sense at all. There you go. He made it work.
I put in for acoustic. I think underrated is Yacht Dance.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. Yacht Dance is rather nice. And I remember, I'm trying to think how we came by the nylon acoustic, because I don't know where that guitar came from. I played nylon string guitar. I've never owned a nylon string acoustic guitar. We must have rented it, or I think we probably rented it from a shop in Oxford, which was, nearest town to where the manor was at the time. And we had it for a couple of days. And I'd had this melody that I'd worked out in rehearsal. I'm not sure whether I was planning to play it on 12 string or a steel string or what. But a lot of people have brought that up for consideration as one of their favourite songs, and they mentioned the acoustic guitar, the nylon string guitar figure, which I was quite pleased with at the time. I know it didn't take up at all very long, because I was really impressed with the way Hugh Padgham was able to get the sound on tape. I thought, this is such a quiet, delicate sound, and we've got these huge drums. How is this going to, how is it going to cut through? So, I think that we spent more than an hour on it. It was really quite straightforward.
Well, I
No
think there's
problems at
also
all.
no cymbals, and it's that open snare sound that's so popping on it.
Yeah, that's right. That is nice. Yes, it sounds like something you'd hear in a harbour. That knock. It might be, I don't know, a sort of like a piece of some wooden something attached to the side of a hull, banging gently against a ship's
Mm.
hull or something. I don't know, but it all works. And that little Balinese percussion device, the anklem, it was just stood in the stone room. It was something Richard Branson had brought back from holiday, and he thought it fun to put in the studio. And it was like a sort of a wooden xylophone on a frame, xylophone. And I think, ended up just shaking it. And had this sort of magical. It's made of bamboo. You can hear the bamboo.
Mm. If you
Yeah,
had to
that's
play,
a nice little. I agree. I'd forgotten about that.
oh yeah, it's really nice, and I always like that Even like on No Thugs, that the band had acoustic and electric going at the same time. I think that's such a great combo.
Well, I think the No Thugs effect was, I'm pretty sure the inspiration for that instrumentation thing was Eddie Cochran's Summertime Blues. I always loved the sound of his acoustic guitar on that. The first time I heard it as a little kid, I just, it's something, again, acoustic guitar and drums, perfectly matched, beautiful, really, really exciting sound. And then I came up with that big, brutal guitar riff that just sort of powers the thing along. But I had this Marshall bass amp. It's only 50 watts. My God, it was so loud. It was impossible to stand next to it when it was turned up past about 3. It would just damage your hearing. And I remember we set it up in the stone room at the Manor, and you put a microphone halfway down the room. We put the amp at one end of the room, put the mic in the middle of the room, and I think there were a couple of overheads up in the gallery. And then turned the volume up. I came out of the room, shut both the glass doors, and we had this long extension cable in the DI box to the guitar. Cranked the Strat up, bridge pickup. I mean, it was so loud. It was Hendrix loud. And but at least we got it on tape. It sounded suitably brutal and unforgiving. So there was that, and the acoustic guitar.
Yeah, no, it's a heavy guitar going against the acoustic. It's nice. And of course, that's kind of fits in lyrically too with the contrast between the control and lack of there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you had to choose one song to play to people and say, this is XTC, do you have one?
Well, which one would it be? Which one would it be? Well, yeah, but the thing is, it's like, what is XTC? There's no one song that sums up the whole band. I mean, I think most people would say, well, it's Making Plans for Nigel, isn't it? Or it's Senses Working Overtime. They're the big hits. They're the ones everyone knows. Oh, you must know XTC. They did this song. And they're great singles. They really are. And I'm proud of having been involved with those, because that's what people remember us for. That's the indoor for a lot of people. So I'd probably take the simple option and choose one of those two and say, right, this is what we did all those years ago. Now go seek.
So, but then what's the XTC song that you think people should hear that they don't know well enough?
I would love them to hear Earn Enough for Us. That is such a rocking little song. Why it was never a single, I think someone at Virgin Records had a grudge against anything Andy had written at the time, because he'd made himself, he just kind of, he wasn't cooperating with them. He was being difficult all the time. He wouldn't tour, he wouldn't promote the album. He's just being difficult, and I think pissed a lot of people off up at the record company. So even though they had an Andy song as a perfect single, they chose to release a couple of Collins songs, which weren't bad, but they weren't hits. So I would like to say to people, this is a great song. This rocks. Listen to these guitars. Listen to the groove. What a great melody. Check it out.
It's a winner.
I always loved that.
Did Todd say Grass should be the single?
No, I think Todd at that point, by the time it came to choosing singles, Todd had pretty much washed his hands of the project. He wasn't, I don't think he had any intention of helping us any further than he already had. I think he'd been so upset by some of the things that Andy had said that he didn't want to do anything to help us, which is again a shame.
Yeah, but in spite of that, still a truly great record was made.
Yeah, it's one of my it's one of the highlights of my life. going over there and working with him and doing that. I couldn't ask for a better reward for drawing breath. You know, that will always be the high point of my XTC experience.
So, what's your favorite song then on Skylarking, if not Earn Enough for Us?
I liked Ballet for a Rainy Day.
Yeah.
And in fact, the little trio of songs, Ballet, Thousand Umbrellas, and what's the last song called? Yeah, I'm supposed to know this stuff. Yeah, Season Cycle. Those three together. Those three songs together are as good as anything we ever did.
Season Cycle, another one of those Wilson references.
Yeah. Yeah, that little vocal section in the middle. I remember working on that, and I had to sing this really high, but to close down some. It was a real strain for me to hit that high note, and but they kept saying, "Go on, Dave, you got the range, you got the breathy sound that we're looking for. You know, you got to do it." You sure this is going to work? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, I did it, and there, that was one of the few little moments where we all worked together as a team and nailed that center section without any arguments. It was just, healthy exchange of views and ideas and trying stuff out and working together as a team. And I think the whole of that particular song was much without any incident or bad feelings between people at all.
Is it fair to say that Skylarking is your favorite XTC album?
Well, I think possibly in terms of collection of songs, I probably prefer Oranges and Lemons and Nonsuch. Nonsuch was always my favorite. And then when Stephen Wilson started remixing for 5.1 and did new stereo mixes, he did a stereo mix of Oranges and Lemons. And I was stunned. I thought I never realized this record could sound as good as he's made it sound. Really, really thrilled with what he did with that. So I think song-wise, Oranges and Lemons probably is the best one for me. But then experience-wise, I'd have to say Skylarking because it's unique. It's as much Todd Rundgren's record as it is ours. Whether he's flattered by that comparison or not, I don't know. But without his input, it wouldn't be the record that it is.
And he did some lovely arranging on it.
Yeah, he did. Did some fantastic arranging, not just instrumentally, but vocally as well.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But he was quite brutal to Andy sometimes with, if Andy wasn't singing quite in tune, he'd let him know. That didn't go down very well.
Nobody likes that.
No.
What was the vocal arranging he contributed?
Well, I've just mentioned Season Cycle. That center section, he can. And Dear God, I think there was some stuff on Dear God. Was it that he helped?
Well, he came up with the idea for the child singer.
Yes, he did. Yes. I should really have revised the entire catalogue before talking to you, Greg, because I'm afraid my memory now
I'm sorry,
isn't
Dave.
what it was. It's got. You might strike lucky. You might find something that I can remember.
You're doing
clearly.
Great. You're the best, Dave.
I struggle now at my age and with all the time that's passed. It's falling into distant memory.
Well, many of us still consider you a vital XTC musicologist.
But I have to look it up. I've written it down somewhere. Shigemasa Fujimoto has done an excellent discography. And if I've ever lost for any dates or whatever it is. I just have to dive into that book, and it's there in print forever.
What
So
is it
thanks
called?
to him. It's called, one second, I'll find
Sure.
it. I know where it is. Most die-hard XTC fans already have this book, but here it is. XTC Chronology, 1966 to 1999. I helped him with a lot of the dates because I kept diaries and have a lot of photographs as well with dates on them. And so that's why I got a special mention there. So I helped him compile the early stuff, but he's updated it a number of times since my my initial contribution, and it's pretty well informed. Well, all the stuff you need to know dates wise, all the tour dates, studio dates, what have you, is all here, and it's very useful to have.
Is it still
Useful.
around? Is it available?
I believe so, yes. You probably have to go online. I think you can get yes, I believe you can buy a download. So you're going to have to print out, all of this. But it's full of old cuttings and reviews and tour dates and all the rest of it. It's really a worthy addition to any XTC fans collection.
I will look for that. I do not have it. I've enjoyed the supplementals like the bumper book with all
Yeah.
the old Limelight stuff.
Yes, that's good. That's a good one.
Well, because I'm always fascinated in the contemporaneous responses to things. We're talking about this 50 years ago
Yes.
of things. How did it land at that moment? Because in a way, that's almost not the most important thing about it, right? It's
That's
how
exactly
it weathered over time, and now we listen to it. We're completely sort of objective, and we kind of have some more space on it. I always think it takes 30 years, but let's say then 50. If we're looking
Yep.
at Black Sea, and we're looking at the transition to being a studio band, all of the XTC music holds up over time, and I think that all of the best art does, and all of the best art for me also exists outside of time. So we can look at it in terms of its period and what was going on culturally, etc. But then we can also remove it from that, and that's for me when it really stands on its own two legs.
Yes, indeed. And then for that reason, this is why I've managed to collect so many. I used to subscribe to this magazine. I probably mentioned this last time, Beat Instrumental in the 60s. It was a monthly glossy mag for gear freaks like me in the 60s. Started out as a thing called Beat Monthly, which also produced a magazine called The Beatles Monthly, which was also produced in the wake of educator Beatles fans, same publishing house. But I've kept up them all from 1963 right through. I've managed to find them right through up to the end of 72, I think. But like you say, it's how this music was received and perceived at the time it arrived. And reading some of the reviews and the interviews with the artists and all those, it's a real eye-opener, because now you have the objectivity of all this distance, and you've grown to love and live with much of this music, how the artists themselves saw it at the time and how it came to be. It's always fascinating, and I'm still finding out stuff now. That's why I love to chat to musicians who have a sort of pedigree and who were there at the time, who've made some records and made a difference, even if it's only maybe one or two hit songs. They all have great stories to tell, regardless of whether I'm a fan or not. I'm a sucker for a music documentary. It doesn't matter who it is. I want to hear the story, and never get tired of listening to people how they found their way through life and ended up where they were.
And that's why I'm doing this podcast.
Uh,
I find that stuff fascinating. I love musical autobiographies and biographies,
Oh yeah,
but just biographies in general, where you can get inside somebody's
yes,
thought process, what their world was, why they were making these choices. Um, but when you look at some contemporaneous takes on things like anything from Yes to Gentle Giant to ELP to XTC, I don't know that the writers were really prepared or that they were knowledgeable enough to even to put a kind of assessment onto that
mm,
music. And bands like XTC that were sort of never really quite in a mold. I mean, the fact that you guys were ever considered new wave or any of that stuff, I don't really see it, because as I told Andy, I thought you were much more subversive of all of those formats that you were supposedly connected to. So yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you about this stuff, because we've all had weird reviews and people who clearly didn't get what it was, and then you have to cope with, well, they didn't get it, so is it a
mm,
bad
mm,
review? But now you look at XTC's music, and obviously um, just a massive catalog, which I think is
yeah.
important for people to realize. All of the box sets, or the extended material stuff that's been coming out bears that out. Songs that weren't used and different ways of approaching the material. Dave, what are you up to these days? I'm sure people would love to know what you're up to.
Well, I'm kind of taking it easy, really, because I've left Big Train, and since then I've been lucky. I've had some session work. I'm able to work from home and post my work through via the internet to these people's studios and everything, and it's all working. This is a really great way to work. It saves a lot of time. Uh, it's cheaper for the artist because they don't have to waste time listening to countless takes of mine that they'll never be able to use, and eating up studio time. Stuff like it's just a great way to work. So I've been doing. See, I've worked since Christmas. I've done maybe four or five projects for other people. And today I've just delivered a guitar track to my friend Phil Thornalley, who has a concept. He's a huge Todd Rundgren fan. He's been a friend of mine for years and years. We first met when he was assistant engineer when we were mixing the Big Express at Rack Studios in 1984. And I was sitting at the piano. We got to the studio. First thing I do when I go to a studio, used to do when days when we were still visiting proper studios, sit at the piano and hear how the room sounds, because it wasn't often I had the opportunity to sit at a properly tuned professional high-end piano. And so I just happened to be picking out the chords to a Todd Rundgren song, Marlene, one of my favorite of his songs.
That's a good one, yeah.
Just as I was doing so, guy comes down the stairs. What's that you're playing? What's that? I said, oh, it's a Todd Rundgren song. Yeah, I know it's Marlene. Yeah, are you a Todd fan? So that's where it all started. So we've been friends ever since. And Phil's also worked on I think he helped mix Big Express and it's Mama. That's right, it's the first one. I think it was the Mama album. You'll find his name on a couple of our albums. Anyway, he went on to work with The Cure, and he produced a couple of that song Love Cats with the string bass. He played that and produced it. And he's had a sort of he's been working a lot with Bryan Adams. He did a lot of work with him, and that's where he made all his money. And so Phil, we stayed in touch, and Todd is really what we end up talking about whenever we get together. So now last year or the year before, he put out an album called Astral Drive, which was basically named after Todd's little place in the Something Anything sessions. All very Todd-inspired songs. He even had Kasim Sultan playing bass on a couple of things. they're good friends. And we met at last, yes, that's right. We met at Hammersmith Odeon 2 years ago when Todd came to London.
Oh yeah, you went to the show.
Yeah. It was a great show. And Prairie, of course, was there, and Kazim and Greg from the Cars. Yeah. So it was a great night, even though I didn't actually, I met Todd briefly before the show. He was on his way out to dinner. Didn't see him afterwards. But Phil and I hooked up again. He said, look, I'm doing these songs, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to take part? Do you want to play some guitar? My next record. I said, yeah, just give us a call, Phil. So here we are. I've just done some guitar. He's done a cover of Determination, which was the song that closed side one of Hermit of Mink Hollow. And he asked me to do some guitar on it. So I've done the screaming lead guitar with my own embellishments and a rhythm guitar track as well. The little pixie guitar, he was able to cope with that. So that's all done. But anyway, he's going to do a couple of EPs, I believe. I think it's going to be 4 tracks. But as I say, that's a few months away. So there's that. That's the most recent thing I've done. And I'm also working with some French couple, Francois Ribac and Eva Schwab, who I last worked with about 8 years ago. They worked on a theatrical project, and he'd arranged and scored out a chart for a bunch of different instruments, but he now wants all these instruments replaced with electric guitars. So he called me and said, I've got the charts, I've got the scores. I'll send you the scores. Can you replace these various parts with electric guitar? I said, well, yeah, sounds great. And it is. It's really, really interesting music. Very, very off the beaten track, not what you hear anywhere else. And I think it's because they're French artists, and the French artists are looked after by the government. They're funded properly, they're nurtured, they're cared for. You wouldn't find a project like that happening anywhere else, I don't think. And it's great that they're able to do that, because it's unique and it's kind of special. And they're gifted people, and it's a joy and a privilege to be working with them, quite honestly. So I still have a little bit more of that work to do, which I'll probably finish up next week. And then I'm working on my own things. I was surprised to find that I had some unused material or unfinished material from dating back a couple of years, not that far back. Most of the stuff from the dim, distant past can stay there because it's rubbish. But some of the more recent stuff that I've done, I'm reasonably happy with. So I might, at some point, gather together enough material to do an album. But it's a long way off. I'm not making any promises.
And this is your original tunes?
Yeah. This is all original stuff. It's stuff that, I'm not as driven to do it, because I don't see myself as a solo artist. I don't. I can't sing, so I have to somehow use this voice and utilize it in such a way that I can get away with maybe expressing a feeling or whatever it is, other than giving a vocal performance, because I'm really not been blessed with a singer's voice, other than, the odd high, breathy harmony. It's about the best I can offer. But it's still fun. I still enjoy making music, and that's what I'll forever be doing, as long as I've got, a pair of hands and a pair of ears.
And we'll forever be listening to you, Dave Gregory, as you put stuff out. We're looking for it.
Well, I don't want to disappoint people, and it'll only go out when I'm happy with it.
As it should be. Well, Dave, what a pleasure, as always, to chat with you and to go down those rabbit holes.
There's so many of them, aren't there? It is very Warren-like, but never mind. It's fun, Greg. Always a joy and a pleasure speaking with you, because you're so clued up and you're interested. That's the most important thing. You care about it, and I, it's just really nice to be able to talk to someone, who's similarly, I won't say obsessed, but interested and sufficiently curious about this musical stuff.
Well, it's never ending, isn't it, Dave?
It is. It's a never-ending source of joy, I should say.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what would happen if I were to lose my hearing. You can say, if you go blind, yes, it would be very, very difficult. Life would be terrible. If you lost a hand or a limb or something, yes, you could probably get over that in time. But to lose one's hearing, I think that would be the end of my life.
Well, Dave, I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you taking the time to open up and get into some real stuff here. We love doing it, and I hope you will come back again.
I'd be more than happy to, Greg. And when I have more time, I shall check out more of your interviews. I heard Andy's the epic Andy episodes. I manage. I think I managed to see all of those. Yes, they were quite interesting. You were getting in some very, very deep and obscure stuff.
Yeah.
And I did kind of glaze over at certain points, but never mind. I'm sure it was most entertaining to his fans.
Well, I do hear from the fans. They were very entertained by some of how kind of unhinged it got.
Yes.
And also, being able to tweak him a little bit with asking about things like pulsing.
A wise choice. Why has nobody asked about pulsing before? Or any of the Homo Safari series? What's the issue people have with the Homo Safaris? I don't understand it.
They're very fun. At the very least, they're so fun and just fun. So, Dave, we can go on, and I think I'll come up with some other geeky things to ask you for the next time you're on.
Yeah, I'll be happy to comply. That'd be great, Greg.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for being here, Dave. Dave Gregory, everybody, thank you for listening. More to come on the Progcast. So definitely like and subscribe. We'll give you some more stuff like this. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Bye, Greg.